The box was already waiting on the porch when Lily came home from her shift at the bakery. Not a large box, just standard cardboard sealed with packing tape that caught the last slant of October sunlight. Her name was written across the top in Corinne's sharp, impatient handwriting. Just Lily. Not even her full name. The shorthand version her stepmother had used for 2 years, the one that made her feel temporary, disposable. Lily stood on the cracked concrete steps, her key ring heavy in her cold fingers. The air had that brittle quality that comes before the first hard frost. 2 years since her father's pickup had hit black ice on Route 9 and wrapped itself around an oak tree. 2 years since this house had stopped being a home and become just a place where she slept. Corinne had made that clear in 1,000 small ways. The photographs of Lily's father moved from the mantel to a cardboard box in the basement. Lily's place at the dinner table shifted to a stool at the kitchen counter. The way Rhett Donovan, Corinne's new husband, would look straight through her when he walked into a room as if she were made of air. She had known this day was coming. 18. The magic number that transformed legal obligation into voluntary charity. And Corinne Garrett was fresh out of charity. Lily nudged the box with her foot. Lighter than she expected. She pictured everything she owned packed inside. A few changes of clothes, some paperback novels with broken spines, her high school diploma, the framed photograph of her mother holding her at the beach, both of them squinting into the sun, both of them laughing. Everything that mattered reduced to something that could fit in a box you could carry with 2 hands. She took a breath. The cold stung her lungs. She turned the key. The house was silent. Too silent. Usually, the television was on, or Corinne's 2 children from her first marriage were tearing through the rooms. But today, there was only a deep humming quiet. The kind of quiet that means something is about to change. Corinne was sitting at the kitchen table. A mug of tea steamed in front of her. A stack of envelopes sat beside it. She didn't look up when Lily came in. "Your things are on the porch," Corinne said. Her voice was flat, rehearsed. "There's a bus ticket to Millbrook in the top envelope. Leaves at 7 tomorrow morning." Lily stood in the doorway between the hall and the kitchen. The worn linoleum was cool beneath the thin soles of her work shoes. She could feel the house rearranging itself around her, its atoms shifting to push her out, making space for the life Corinne was building. A life with Rhett. A life that had no room for the daughter of a dead man. Millbrook. Lily's voice came out smaller than she intended. The name was a faint echo from a childhood she barely remembered. A place her mother used to mention. Her hometown, where the river ran fast and cold. "Your grandmother." Corinne finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, but there was a glint of relief in them. The relief of a burden about to be lifted. "Your mother's mother, Clara Hayes. She left you something in her will. It's been tied up in probate since she died, but it cleared now that you're of legal age. The lawyer sent notification last week." Lily stared at her. Clara Hayes. She had a vague memory of a woman with flour on her hands and a voice like wind through leaves. She had disappeared from Lily's life when she was 6 or 7. Her father had said Clara moved away, that she was difficult, that she'd cut ties with everyone. He never spoke of her again. "She's dead. Years ago," Corinne said. She took a sip of her tea, then pushed the stack of envelopes across the table. "This is everything. The deed, the keys, a letter from the lawyer. It's a carriage house, apparently. Part of some old estate outside Millbrook." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Don't get your hopes up. The lawyer said it's been vacant for a decade, probably falling apart. He called it a liability mostly. You'll have property taxes to deal with. A liability. A worthless, crumbling carriage house in a town Lily didn't know, left by a grandmother she couldn't remember. This was her inheritance, her grand send-off into adulthood. "So that's it?" Lily asked. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "I take this and I go, that's it." Corinne didn't flinch, didn't soften. "Lily, this was never going to be permanent. You know that. I have my own family now. Rhett and I need the space." She looked around the kitchen, at the life she was building. The life that had no place for a dead man's daughter. Lily didn't argue. She didn't plead. All the fight had been drained out of her over the past 2 years, replaced by a dull, persistent ache. She just nodded. She walked to the table, her footsteps unnaturally loud in the silence, and picked up the thick manila envelope. It felt heavy, not with promise, but with finality. Inside, she could feel the cold, hard shape of keys. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, out of the house. She closed the front door softly behind her. Didn't slam it. Didn't look back. Just picked up the box, walked down the cracked concrete steps for the last time, and headed toward the distant glow of the bus station. She had a liability to claim. The motel near the bus station was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour. Flickering neon sign, carpets that smelled of stale smoke, and industrial cleaner. $70 for the night. Lily paid with the last of her paycheck, the bills feeling thin and inadequate in her hand. $43 left. Enough for a few meals, maybe. The room was small, wallpaper peeling in one corner. A single bed with a faded quilt that had been washed too many times. She dropped the box on the floor and sat on the edge of the mattress. The springs groaned. The silence here was different from the silence at Corinne's house. That had been an angry silence, resentful. This was just empty, a void. Lily pulled the large envelope from her jacket pocket and dumped its contents onto the bed. A bus ticket, just as Corinne had said. A set of old-fashioned iron keys on a steel ring. One large ornate made of black iron with a cloverleaf-shaped head. The other smaller, simpler brass. A thick, folded document that looked like a deed covered in dense legal language. And a business-sized envelope with a law firm's name printed in the corner. Brennan and Associates, Attorneys at Law. She opened that one first. The letter inside was on heavy cream-colored paper. formal, crisp. It was addressed to her. Miss Lily Wren Hayes. It explained briefly that her grandmother, Clara Wren Hayes, had passed away 8 years ago. That her sole asset, a property described as the carriage house and associated parcel of land at 112 River Road, had been held in trust until Lily's 18th birthday. It was now legally hers. The letter was signed by Mr. Alistair Brennan, senior partner. He invited her to call his office upon arrival in Millbrook to discuss the particulars of the inheritance and a standing offer from a local development concern. A standing offer. The phrase caught in her mind like a fishhook. Why would anyone be making an offer on a worthless, falling-down building? Corinne had made it sound like a burden, a cursed thing she was being saddled with. But developers don't make offers on things that are truly worthless. Lily tucked the letter back into its envelope. Her fingers brushed the keys. They were cold to the touch, heavy with a significance she couldn't yet understand. They were the only real things she had left from a family she'd thought was gone completely. She lay back on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. Her mind was a storm of half-formed memories. The smell of baking bread. The feel of calloused but gentle hands showing her how to tie a knot. A song Clara used to hum while working in a garden. They were like faded photographs, blurry and indistinct. Why did Clara leave? Why did her father say she was difficult? Why did she leave Lily this one specific thing? And why did she structure it so Lily couldn't have it until she was 18 and alone? It felt less like a gift and more like a riddle, or a test. The next morning, Lily was at the bus station before sunrise. The air was frigid. Her breath came out in clouds. She bought coffee and a stale pastry from a vending machine and sat on a hard plastic bench, the box at her feet. The envelope with the keys tucked safely in her inside jacket pocket. She was the only person waiting for the 7 o'clock bus to Millbrook. When it finally pulled in with a hiss of air brakes, it looked as tired and worn out as she felt. The journey was 5 hours through a landscape of flat, empty fields and skeletal trees. Lily watched the world go by, feeling like a ghost. She was leaving the only life she'd ever known, heading toward a complete unknown. It was terrifying, but underneath the fear, a tiny unfamiliar feeling was starting to flicker. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was more like curiosity. For the first time in 2 years, she wasn't just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. She was moving towards something. She had a destination. She had a key. When the bus finally rumbled into Millbrook, the town looked exactly like its name suggested. Small, quiet. Nestled in a river valley, the buildings made of old brick and stone. The sky was a vast, unforgiving gray. A cold wind swept down the main street, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Lily got off the bus with her box and stood on the sidewalk, feeling utterly out of place. She had no phone, no one to call. Just an address on a piece of paper and a lawyer's name. She found a payphone, surprised one still existed, and used her last few coins to call the office of Brennan and Associates. A crisp professional voice answered. Mr. Brennan was expecting her. The office was on the corner of Main and Elm, 3rd floor. Mr. Alistair Brennan's office was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town lawyer who'd been practicing for 40 years. Walls of dark wood, shelves filled with thick leather-bound books, a large desk that commanded the room. He was an older man, probably in his late 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood up and shook her hand firmly. "Lily," he said. His voice was warm. "I'm Alistair Brennan. I was your grandmother's lawyer and her friend." He gestured for her to sit. "I'm sorry about the circumstances of our meeting. Your stepmother's communication was rather abrupt." Lily just nodded, placing the envelope on his desk. "She said it's a liability." Mr. Brennan picked up the envelope and tapped it gently on his desk. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Corinne Garrett has a particular way of looking at the world," he said dryly. "To her, anything that doesn't produce immediate cash is a liability. Your grandmother saw things differently." He leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "Lily, the carriage house is not worthless. It's old, yes. It's been neglected. But it sits on a very valuable piece of land. The old Mill House estate borders the river. A development company, Riverside Development Corporation, has been buying up all the parcels for the last 5 years. They want to build luxury condominiums. Your grandmother's property is the last holdout. It's a key piece of their puzzle." He paused, letting the information sink in. "They've made a standing offer. $400,000. Lily stared at him. The number didn't seem real. It was more money than she had ever imagined seeing in her entire life. $400,000. Enough to go anywhere. Do anything. Enough to start a new life. A secure life. They want you to take the offer." Mr. Brennan continued, his voice carefully neutral. "They're prepared to close quickly. The money would be in your account within a week." He slid a glossy brochure across the desk. It showed a sleek, modern condominium complex. Glass balconies overlooking a sparkling river. "Riverside Estates," the text proclaimed. "Luxury living naturally." And right in the middle of the architectural drawing where a main access road was supposed to go, there was a small, awkward blank space. Her blank space. Her carriage house. "Why didn't my grandmother sell?" Lily asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. She could have used that money. Mr. Brennan sighed. A deep, heavy sound. "That's a question only Clara could answer. She was a very determined woman. She loved that place. She instructed me very clearly. The property was to be held for you, no one else. And when you turned 18, you were to be given the keys, the deed, and their offer. The choice was to be yours, and yours alone." He looked at her. His gaze was steady, searching. "She left you something else, too. A safe deposit box at First National Bank. I have the key here." He slid a small, numbered key across the desk. She said you should go to the carriage house first. She said you'd know what to do after that. His professional tone softened. Lily, your grandmother was not a difficult woman. She was protective, fiercely so. I think you'll understand why when you see the place she left for you. The walk to 112 River Road took about 20 minutes. It was on the far edge of town where the neat houses with manicured lawns gave way to something wilder. The road itself turned from pavement to gravel flanked by dense woods. The air grew colder. It smelled of pine needles and rich, damp soil. Lily passed a rusted wrought iron gate that must have once been the entrance to the main estate. One of its hinges was broken. It hung open like a broken jaw. The grand house it once guarded was long gone, replaced by a field of weeds and wildflowers swaying in the wind. But a little farther down the road, tucked behind a thick stand of ancient oak trees, was another structure, smaller, separate. The carriage house. It was larger than she'd imagined. A 2-story building made of dark, weathered stone and heavy timber beams. The roof was slate. Some tiles were missing, but it wasn't caved in. It looked less like it was falling down and more like it was sleeping, waiting. It was solid, enduring. A thick carpet of moss grew on the north-facing wall. Ivy crept up one side, framing a large arched window on the second floor. The main doors were massive, made of heavy oak, bleached gray by years of sun and rain. They were designed for horses and carriages, not people. To the left of the great doors was a smaller, human-sized entrance. That had to be it. Lily's heart was pounding as she walked up the 3 stone steps. She felt like she was approaching something sacred. A sanctuary or a tomb, she couldn't tell which. She sorted through the keys. The big ornate iron key was for the main carriage doors. The smaller brass one was for this door. She slid it into the lock. It was stiff from disuse. She had to jiggle it, putting her shoulder into the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep groaning complaint of metal on metal, the lock turned. The sound echoed in the profound quiet of the woods. She pushed the door open. It swung inward on protesting hinges into a world of dust and shadows. The air that rolled out was thick and musty. The smell of trapped time. It smelled of old wood and dry earth and something else. Something faint and floral, like dried lavender. Lily hesitated on the threshold. Her box of belongings felt flimsy and insignificant in her hands. She was stepping out of her life and into someone else's, into her grandmother's. She took a step inside. The door swung shut behind her with a soft click, plunging her into near darkness. A few thin beams of light sliced through the grime on the windows, illuminating swirling galaxies of dust motes. Her eyes slowly adjusted. She was in a large open space. The ground floor was paved with cobblestones worn smooth by decades of use. She could see the faint outlines of horse stalls, their wooden partitions still intact. On the other side was a large empty area, where a carriage would have been parked. A heavy wooden staircase with a thick carved banister led up to the second floor. Everything was covered in a uniform layer of gray dust, a soft blanket that muted all the hard edges. It was like a scene from a fairy tale, a place put to sleep by a magic spell. Lily set her box down on a dusty workbench. In the center of the main floor was a huge shape covered by a canvas tarpaulin. It was massive, the size of a small car. Curiosity got the better of her. She walked over her footsteps, echoing in the vast space, and took a corner of the heavy canvas. She pulled it back. Underneath was not a carriage, but a truck. An old Ford pickup from the 1950s. Its paint was a faded seafoam green. Its chrome grille was dulled by time but not rusted through. It was beautiful, preserved under its canvas shroud like something precious. Why would Clara keep this? Lily let the canvas fall back into place and turned her attention to the rest of the ground floor. Tucked into one of the old horse stalls was a collection of garden tools, shovels, rakes, a wheelbarrow. Their wooden handles were smooth with use. In another stall, shelves were lined with clay pots of all sizes, all empty. It was clear this place hadn't been about horses for a very long time. It had been a workshop, a gardener's sanctuary. She made her way to the staircase. The banister was cool and solid under her hand. She climbed slowly. The wooden steps creaked under her weight. Each sound was a punctuation mark in the deep silence. The second floor was one enormous room, an open-plan living space under a high vaulted ceiling with exposed timber beams. It was stunning, even covered in dust. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall. A simple kitchenette was tucked into a corner, its porcelain sink and countertops coated in gray. In the center of the room was a wooden table and 2 chairs. And against the far wall underneath the huge arched window she'd seen from outside was a long, sturdy desk. On the desk, in the exact center, was a single object, a wooden box. It wasn't fancy. Plain cedar with a simple brass latch. But it was the only thing in the entire building that wasn't covered in dust. It was clean, spotless, as if it had been wiped down that very morning. Lily's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was what Clara wanted her to find. She walked across the room. The floorboards groaned a welcome. The light from the arched window fell directly on the box, illuminating it in the gloom. She reached out and ran her fingers over the smooth, clean wood. It felt warm, alive. Her hands were trembling as she unhooked the small brass latch. She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded blue velvet, was a stack of letters. They were tied together with a simple silk ribbon. On top of the stack was a single folded sheet of paper. She picked it up. The handwriting was elegant, a looping cursive she vaguely recognized. It said simply, "For Lily. Start here." She untied the ribbon with careful fingers. The letters were in thick, cream-colored envelopes, each one numbered in the top right corner. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 12. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. This wasn't just a building. It was a story. Clara's story. and she had left it for Lily to read. She pulled out the first letter, her fingers fumbling with the seal. She sat down in the dusty chair at the desk, took a deep breath of the time-heavy air, and began to read. The paper was thick and soft. The ink was a faded blue. Clara's handwriting was beautiful, but a little shaky. The loops and swirls were full of character. Lily held it in the beam of light from the window and began to read her grandmother's words, feeling as though Clara were whispering them directly into the silent room. "My dearest Lily," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means you are 18. It means you are a woman. And it means I fear that you are alone. I am so sorry for that. I am sorry for every hard day you have had to face without me, without your mother. Please believe me when I say that not a day has gone by when I have not thought of you." Lily had to stop and take a breath. The directness of it, the immediate love. It was a physical blow. She'd spent 2 years feeling like a ghost in her own life. And here was a voice from the past, from beyond the grave, seeing her more clearly than anyone had in years. She read on. "There are things you need to know. Things your father in his grief and his pride would never have been able to tell you. He was a good man, your father. But he was a simple man. He saw the world in black and white. And what happened with our family was anything but. Let me start with this place. This carriage house. This was my home. It was my parents' home before me. The main house on the estate, the mill house, belonged to a wealthy family who lost everything in the crash. My father, a stonemason, was their groundskeeper. They paid him in land instead of money. Gave him this small parcel, this carriage house. It was all we ever had. But we made it a home. I was born in the room you're sitting in now. Your mother was too." Lily looked around the vast, dusty space, trying to imagine it filled with life. A baby crying. A mother singing. The smell of cooking instead of the smell of dust. It seemed impossible. When your mother met your father, I was so happy for her. He loved her dearly, but he wanted to pull her into his world. A world of new things, of suburbs and mortgages. He didn't understand this place. He saw it as old, run down. He saw our life here as small. He didn't see the freedom in it, the independence. Your mother was torn. She loved him, but she loved this place too. It was her anchor. Then you were born. And you, my sweet Lily, you were a joy. You had your mother's eyes and my stubborn chin. I remember holding you right here by this window and telling you that this place would always be here for you. A safe harbor. Lily's eyes were starting to burn. She could almost feel it. A phantom memory of being held, of looking out that very window at the green trees. Then your mother got sick. It was fast and it was cruel. The doctors gave her a year. Your father fell apart. He couldn't accept it. He mortgaged their house to pay for experimental treatments. Anything to give him a shred of hope. He drained his savings. He went into terrible debt. But nothing worked. When she was gone, all he had left was his grief and a mountain of bills. This was the part of the story Lily knew, but hearing it from Clara's perspective made it raw and new. She remembered the hushed conversations, the endless stream of casseroles from neighbors, the way her father seemed to shrink, to fold in on himself. He was going to lose everything, Lily. The house, his job, everything. He was going to have to declare bankruptcy. And that's when they came for him. The men he owed money to weren't from a bank. He'd gotten desperate. He'd borrowed from the wrong people. They were dangerous. They threatened him. And then they threatened you. The air in the room grew suddenly colder. The dust motes seemed to freeze in midair. I found out from a friend in town. They were watching your school. They knew your routine. They told your father that if he couldn't pay, they would take you as collateral. He was terrified. He didn't know what to do. He came to me for the first time in years. He came here to this house broken. He confessed everything. He wanted to sell this place. He said it was the only asset we had left. The developers were already sniffing around and making offers. He said the money would pay off his debts and set you both up for a new life. He begged me to sell, and I said no. Lily stopped reading. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the letter. Clara said no. She could have saved them, paid off the debt, made them safe. Why would she refuse? It was exactly what her father had said, that Clara was difficult, that she'd refuse to help. I know what you must be thinking. The letter continued as if Clara could hear her thoughts across time. You must think I was cruel, selfish. Your father certainly did. He called me a monster. He said I was choosing a pile of stone and wood over my own granddaughter's safety. He left that night and never spoke to me again. He told everyone I had abandoned you. It was easier, I think, for him to believe that. But Lily, here is the truth. Selling this place wouldn't have saved you. It would have only postponed the danger. Those men, they don't just take their money and leave. They would have seen your father as a source, and they would have kept coming back. And the money would have put a target on your back for the rest of your life. I couldn't let that happen. I had to get you away from them, permanently. I had to make you disappear. So I made a different deal. Not with your father, but with them. I contacted them myself. I met them. I told them I would pay your father's debt in cash in full on one condition. They leave your father and you alone, forever. They were to forget you existed. They were to consider the debt paid and walk away. And I had a second condition. To ensure your safety, everyone had to believe I had abandoned my family. My reputation was the price of your freedom, Lily. I had to become the villain in your story so that you could have a chance to live it. Lily could barely see the words through the blur of tears. It wasn't abandonment. It was a sacrifice. A shield. Clara hadn't been difficult. She had been a fortress. I sold off everything else I owned. My mother's jewelry, the parcel of land behind the woods. I emptied my accounts. I gathered every penny I had in the world. It was just enough. I paid them, and they kept their word. They vanished. But it left me with nothing, and it left me with a terrible choice. I couldn't come back into your life. The story had to be true. For you to be truly safe, I had to stay away. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. It broke my heart every single day. I left this property in a trust for you with my lawyer Alistair as the executor. I knew the developers would keep trying to buy it. Their greed, I hoped, would inadvertently protect it. No one would bother a worthless old building with a big corporation trying to get it. I made it look dormant, abandoned. I hoped it would be enough to keep it safe until you were old enough to claim it. Until you were old enough to understand. This place is not a liability, Lily. It is your sanctuary. It is the only thing of value I had left to give you. It is debt-free. It is owned outright. It is yours. No one can take it from you. There is more to tell you, more you need to find. But for now, just know this. You were never abandoned. You were protected. You were loved fiercely. All my love, your grandmother Clara, of your... Lily folded the letter. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely control them. The tears she'd been holding back for 2 years finally came. Not quiet tears. Huge, shuddering sobs that tore through her. She cried for the mother she'd lost. She cried for the father who had lived and died under the weight of a terrible secret. She cried for the grandmother she had misunderstood, a woman who had given up everything, her money, her reputation, her family, just to keep Lily safe. She sat there in the dusty, silent room, the letter clutched in her hand, and wept until she had nothing left. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer empty. It was filled with Clara. The sun had shifted. The beam of light that had illuminated the desk was now a soft orange glow creeping across the floorboards. Lily felt hollowed out, scoured clean by grief. The story of her life had been rewritten in the span of 10 minutes. The anger she'd held toward Clara's memory had vanished, replaced by a profound, aching gratitude. The resentment she felt toward her father had softened into a deep, tragic pity. He wasn't a man who had been abandoned by his mother. He was a man trapped by pride and fear. A man who had to create a villain to cope with his own powerlessness. He'd carried that lie to his grave. And Corinne, her casual cruelty suddenly made a different kind of sense. To her, Lily was just the final loose end of her husband's messy, debt-ridden past. This liability of a carriage house was Lily's problem, now not hers. She had no idea she was handing Lily the keys to her own salvation. Lily sat there for a long time, just breathing the air of the room, letting the truth of Clara's letter settle into her bones. Clara hadn't just left her a building. She had left her a truth. She had left her a legacy of strength Lily never knew she had. A standing offer. $400,000. The words of Mr. Brennan echoed in her mind. Before, that number had sounded like a fantasy, a winning lottery ticket. Now it sounded like an insult. Riverside Development Corporation didn't want to buy a piece of land. They wanted to bulldoze Clara's sacrifice. They wanted to pave over her mother's birthplace. They wanted to build luxury condominiums on top of her family's heart. The thought filled her with a cold, hard anger. It was completely different from the helpless rage she'd felt for the last 2 years. This was a focused anger, a purposeful anger. She looked around the room again, seeing it not as a dusty, neglected space, but as a fortress. Her fortress. The thick stone walls, the heavy timber beams, the slate roof. It had stood for over 100 years. It had sheltered her family. It had waited for her. Selling it would be the real abandonment. It would be spitting on Clara's grave, on the memory of her fierce, selfless love. Lily knew with a certainty that was as solid as the stone walls around her that she couldn't do it. But what was the alternative? She was 18 years old with a box of clothes and $43 to her name. The property taxes Corinne had mentioned were a real thing. This place needed work. It needed heat, water, electricity. It needed to be brought back to life. How could she possibly do that? She felt a surge of the old panic, the familiar feeling of being small and overwhelmed. "There is more to tell you," Clara had written. "More you need to find." Lily looked at the cedar box. 11 more letters. And Mr. Brennan had mentioned a safe deposit box. Clara was a planner. She had orchestrated Lily's survival from beyond the grave. She wouldn't have led her here just to watch her fail. She must have left the tools Lily needed. The thought steadied her. This was a test, yes. But it wasn't a test of her strength alone. It was a test of her faith in Clara. Lily stood up. Her joints were stiff. She carefully placed the first letter back in its envelope and set it on the desk. She needed to think. She needed a plan. The first step was simple. She had to explore her inheritance properly. She went back downstairs. Her perspective had completely changed. She was no longer an intruder. She was the custodian. The air, the ground floor was cold. The evening light was fading fast. She ran her hand along the fender of the old Ford truck. Seafoam green. It was a cheerful, optimistic color. Maybe Clara had left it for her. A crazy thought, but no crazier than anything else she'd learned today. She found a light switch on the wall near the door. She flicked it hopefully. Nothing. Of course. The power had likely been off for years. She'd need to get that sorted out. That would cost money. Money she didn't have. Don't panic, she told herself. One step at a time. What would Clara do? Clara was practical, resourceful. Lily looked at the workbench where she'd left her box. It was a solid piece of furniture, built from thick planks of wood scarred with the marks of countless projects. There were drawers underneath. She pulled one open. It slid out smoothly. No sticking. Inside, neatly organized, were tools, wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, all clean and free of rust, resting in felt-lined compartments. She opened another drawer. Hammers, saws. It was a complete, well-cared-for workshop. In the bottom drawer, she found a collection of old oil lamps and a tin of lamp oil still nearly full. There was also a box of matches, a small practical gift from the past. Lily took out one of the lamps, a simple glass one with a brass base. Her hands were clumsy as she filled it, trimmed the wick, and lit it. A soft golden light bloomed in the growing darkness, pushing back the shadows. It smelled of kerosene and home. Holding the lamp aloft, she felt like an explorer in an ancient ruin. The flickering light cast dancing shadows on the cobblestones and stone walls. She decided to make a full circuit of the ground floor. She checked the foundation, running her hand along the massive stone blocks. Solid. She checked the heavy timber beams supporting the second floor. They were thick as her body. The wood was hard and unrotted. This place was built to last. When she got to the back of the carriage house, she found another door, smaller and heavier than the one at the front. It was bolted from the inside with a thick iron slide. She lifted the heavy bolt. The sound of metal scraping on metal echoed in the space. She pulled the door open and was met with a rush of cold night air. She stepped out into a small walled courtyard. It was overgrown with weeds, but she could see the outlines of what had once been a magnificent garden. Stone-lined flower beds, a brick patio, and in the center a stone bird bath green with moss. Even in its neglected state, it was beautiful, peaceful. This must have been Clara's sanctuary. Lily could picture her grandmother out here, hands in the dirt, sun on her back. This was the place she had fought to protect. She went back inside, bolted the door, and carried the lamp back upstairs. The single flame did little to illuminate the vast upper room, but it made the space feel more intimate, cozier. She wasn't ready to read the next letter, not yet. She needed to let the first one settle. She needed to just be here. She went to the small window beside the door and looked out. The woods were a wall of blackness. There were no streetlights out here, no neighbors, just the moon and the stars, which were beginning to appear in the clear, cold sky. She was completely, utterly alone. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel lonely. She felt anchored. She had a place. She had a purpose. The choice was clear. There was no $400,000. There was only this house, her house. The first thing she had to do was survive the night. She didn't have a bed, but she had a roof over her head. She went back downstairs and grabbed the heavy canvas tarpaulin from the truck. It was dusty, but it was thick and warm. She carried it upstairs and laid it out on the floor near the cold fireplace. She retrieved her box of belongings and took out the only blanket she owned. She wrapped herself in it, using her jacket as a pillow. Lying on the hard floor, wrapped in a dusty tarp with $43 in her pocket, and no electricity or running water, she should have been terrified. But she wasn't. She felt a strange sense of peace. She was home. Before she drifted off to sleep, she made a silent promise to the woman who had saved her. "I'll fix it, Grandma," she whispered into the darkness. "I'll make you proud." The next morning, Lily woke up stiff and cold but resolute. The first light was filtering through the grimy arched window, painting the dusty air in shades of gray and pale yellow. Every muscle in her body ached from sleeping on the hard floor, but her mind was sharp, clear. Her first priority was survival. She had a little cash, but it wouldn't last long. She needed a job, and she needed to get the utilities turned on. But before any of that, she had another stop to make: the safe deposit box. She folded the tarp neatly and put it back on the truck, patting the cool metal of the hood like it was a faithful old dog. She grabbed the small brass key Mr. Brennan had given her, locked the carriage house door behind her, and started the walk back into town. The cold morning air felt good, clean. The world seemed sharper, more defined than it had yesterday. She felt a sense of purpose humming in her veins. First National Bank was a formidable stone building on Main Street, right across from the lawyer's office. Lily felt self-conscious walking in. Her clothes were rumpled from sleeping in them. Her hair was a mess. But the teller was polite. When Lily explained she was there to access a safe deposit box left to her by Clara Wren Hayes, the woman's expression softened. She led Lily to a quiet office where a bank manager was waiting. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Everything seems to be in order, Miss Hayes," the manager said after checking Lily's identification and comparing her signature to the one on Clara's file. "Your grandmother was a lovely woman. We all miss her." She led Lily into the vault. The air was cool and still. It felt like walking into a sanctuary of secrets. The manager used her key and Lily's key to open a small metal door, then slid out a long, narrow box and handed it to Lily. "You can use one of the private viewing rooms," she said, gesturing to a small wood-paneled booth. Lily thanked her and carried the box into the room, closing the door behind her. It felt heavier than it should. She sat down and lifted the lid. Her breath hitched. The box was filled with cash. Neat stacks of $100 bills bundled with paper bands. She started pulling them out, her hands shaking. 1 stack, 2, 3. She counted them. There were 10 stacks each with $5,000, $50,000. Lily just stared at it. It was an impossible amount of money. It was a lifeline. It was a miracle. It was Clara, of course. She hadn't left Lily to fend for herself. She had provided. Underneath the cash was a thick envelope. Lily opened it. Inside was a simple hand-drawn map of the carriage house property, and another letter in Clara's familiar script. "Lily," it began, "I hope this is enough to get you started. Use it wisely. Get the power and water turned on. Buy yourself some food and some warm clothes. The old truck in the garage runs. The keys are in the glove box, and the title is with them. It was your grandfather's. He loved that truck. I saved it for you. The most important thing is the well. The map will show you where it is behind the garden wall. The town water is fine, but our well water is clean and sweet. And more importantly, it's free. The pump will need to be serviced, but it's a simple mechanical pump built to last. Independence, Lily. That's the most valuable thing in the world. Don't ever be dependent on a system that can cut you off. Pay your property taxes first. They're not high, but they are non-negotiable. Stay ahead of them. Alistair can help you with the paperwork. Be smart. Be frugal. This money is a tool, not a prize. Use it to build, not to spend. I love you. Now get to work. Clara. Lily laughed. A real, actual laugh that started deep in her chest. Get to work. Even in a letter, Clara was practical. No nonsense. She carefully packed the money and the letter back into the envelope and tucked it deep inside her jacket. She felt like she was carrying dynamite. $50,000. It changed everything. It wasn't just a dream anymore. She could actually do this. She walked out of the bank feeling 10 feet tall. Her first stop was the town utility office. She paid the deposits to have the electricity and water turned on at 112 River Road. The clerk said a technician could be out by the afternoon. Next, she went to the county clerk's office and paid the property taxes for the entire year. $1,200. A fortune to her yesterday. A necessary investment today. The clerk, a woman with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain, looked at the address and smiled. The old Hayes place, she said warmly. Clara was quite a woman. Glad to see someone's taking care of it. It seemed everyone in this town had known and liked Clara. The story her father had told her, the lie Clara had been forced to live, had stayed in his world, not hers. Here she was, remembered for who she really was. Lily's last stop before heading back was a hardware store. She bought a heavy-duty flashlight, a new lock for the door work gloves, cleaning supplies, a bucket, and a sponge. Then she went to a small grocery store and bought bread, cheese, apples, and a large jug of water. Laden with her supplies, she walked back to the carriage house. It looked different in the full light of day, less mysterious and more like a project waiting to begin. The first thing she did was go to the old Ford. She opened the driver's side door. The air inside was stale but clean. She opened the glove box. Just as Clara had said, there was a set of keys and the official vehicle title signed over to her. She put the key in the ignition, not really expecting anything. She turned it. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then, with a deep rumbling roar, it came to life. It actually worked. Lily sat there stunned as the engine settled into a steady, powerful rhythm. Her grandfather's truck. Her truck. She spent the rest of the morning in a frenzy of activity. She swept the thickest layers of dust from the upstairs living area. She washed the windows, letting in streams of clear, bright light. The space was transformed. It was no longer a gloomy cavern, but a bright, airy loft with incredible potential. Late in the afternoon, the utility truck arrived. The technician was a young man, maybe in his mid-20s, with sandy hair and an easy smile. He was friendly and curious about the old place. He got the power on in less than an hour. When he flicked the main breaker, the lights Lily had tried the night before flickered on. Dim at first, then steady. The simple fact of electric light felt like a monumental victory. Next, they checked the water. The technician turned the main valve, and after a series of groans and clanks from the pipes, water gushed from the tap in the upstairs sink. It was brown at first, full of rust and sediment, but after a few minutes it ran clear. "You're all set," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "This place is built like a fortress. Good bones, good bones." That's what Clara had left her. That night, Lily didn't sleep on the floor. She ate a simple meal of bread and cheese at the old wooden table, the room lit by a single bare bulb. It was the best meal she had ever eaten. She had a home. She had a plan. She had work to do. And for the first time, she had hope. A deep, solid, unshakable hope. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Lily woke with the sun, her body aching from labor. It wasn't used to, but her mind clear. She spent the mornings cleaning. She scrubbed floors, washed walls, cleared out decades of accumulated debris from the old horse stalls. She found treasures in the dust, old tools, a stack of magazines from the 70s, a child's wooden horse with one rocker missing. Each object was a small piece of the lives lived here. In the afternoons, she worked on the garden, following the instructions in Clara's letters, which she was reading one each night. She started by clearing the weeds from the stone-lined beds. The soil underneath was dark and rich. Clara had spent a lifetime nurturing it. It was slow, back-breaking work. But with every weed she pulled, Lily felt like she was reclaiming not just the land, but a piece of herself. She bought a cheap mattress and a sleeping bag in town, a small electric hot plate to cook on. She was living simply, but she was living well. A week after she arrived, she got her first official piece of mail. It was a letter from Riverside Development Corporation, forwarded by Mr. Brennan. It was formal, aggressive. It reiterated their offer of $400,000 and stated that the offer was final and time-sensitive. It hinted at legal action to claim the property through eminent domain for community development if Lily refused to be reasonable. It was a threat wrapped in corporate jargon. Lily read it and felt nothing but cold resolve. She took the letter, walked downstairs, and tacked it to the wall of the workshop, a reminder of what she was fighting against. That afternoon, she called Mr. Brennan from a payphone in town. "I got the letter from Riverside," she said, her voice steady. "I see," he replied carefully. "I assume you'll be accepting their offer. I can have the paperwork ready by Friday." There was a pause. "Mr. Brennan," Lily said, "I'm not selling." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. She could almost hear him processing her words. "Lily," he said finally, his voice careful, $400,000 is a life-changing amount of money for a young woman in your position. Are you certain you've thought this through?" "I've thought it through," she said, looking at the payphone's scratched metal surface. "This place is not for sale. Not for any price." "They won't give up easily," he warned. "They have deep pockets and a team of lawyers who are very good at getting what they want." "My grandmother didn't give up," Lily replied. "Neither will I." She could hear a faint smile in his voice when he spoke again. "All right, Lily. All right. In that case, you're going to need a zoning variance if you want to live there legally. It's currently zoned as an outbuilding, not a residence, and you'll need to bring it up to code. That's what they'll use against you. They'll report you to the county and try to have the place condemned." "What do I need to do?" Lily asked. "I'll send you the paperwork," he said. "But you'll need proper plumbing, a certified heat source insulation. It's a long list. It will be expensive." "I have some money," Lily said. "My grandmother left me some." "I see," he said, and there was a note of understanding in his voice. Clara always did have a plan. "All right, let's get to work." Get to work. The phrase gave her a jolt of strength. This was the next part of the test, the fight. And she wasn't alone. She had Clara's money and she had Mr. Brennan in her corner. The next few weeks were a blur of hard work and bureaucracy. Mr. Brennan sent over a mountain of paperwork for the zoning variance. Lily spent her evenings at the big table filling out forms by lamplight, trying to make sense of legal and technical language that seemed designed to confuse. During the day, she worked on the house. She hired a local plumber to inspect the old pipes. He was a gruff man in his 60s with weathered hands and a no-nonsense attitude. He told her the main lines were solid cast iron and in good shape, but the fixtures and connections needed updating. The job took 3 days and cost $8,500. Next came the electrician, a different man, younger, who replaced the ancient knob and tube wiring that he said was a fire hazard waiting to happen. Another $12,000. These two things alone ate up nearly half of Clara's money. Panic flared in Lily's chest, but she pushed it down. This was an investment. This was what the money was for. To build. As the weather grew colder, she knew her next priority had to be heat. The old stone fireplace was beautiful, but it wouldn't be enough to heat the whole space. Clara's next letter, which she read the night the plumber finished his work, seemed to anticipate her problem. "Lily," it said, "winter in this valley is no joke. The fireplace is the heart of the home, but you'll need more. In the back of the workshop, behind the stacks of old lumber, you'll find the stove your great-grandfather bought. It's a wood-burning stove, a big cast-iron beast. He used it to heat his workshop in the winters. It's efficient and it will keep the whole place warm as long as you have wood to feed it. The woods on our property are full of fallen oak. It's hard work, but it's free fuel. Remember what I said about independence." The next morning, Lily went to the back of the workshop. Behind a pile of weathered gray planks, there it was. A huge black pot-bellied wood stove. It was covered in dust but seemed to be in perfect condition. It took her the better part of 2 days with the help of a rented dolly to move the massive stove upstairs. and install it running the stovepipe up through the old chimney flue. It was the hardest physical work she had ever done. But that evening, when she split some of the fallen oak she'd gathered from the woods and built her first fire in the stove, the feeling was indescribable. The iron creaked and groaned as it heated up. And then a deep, penetrating warmth began to radiate through the room. It was a living heat. Completely different from the dry, sterile heat of a furnace. It was the heat of her own labor. She sat in front of it, feeling the warmth on her face, and felt a sense of pride so deep it almost hurt. She was doing it. She was building a life. It was during her second week of work that she met Franklin Whitmore. She was in the hardware store studying a display of woodworking tools she couldn't afford when a voice behind her said, "Those are good chisels, but you want the ones with the ash handles, not the beech. They last longer." Lily turned. The man was in his early 60s with silver hair and a face lined by years of sun and honest work. He wore flannel and work boots. His hands were large and capable, marked with the scars of a lifetime of craftsmanship. "I don't actually know the first thing about chisels," Lily admitted. "I'm just looking." "You're the Hayes girl," he said. It wasn't a question. "The one fixing up the carriage house." Word traveled fast in small towns. "I'm Lily," she said, extending her hand. "Franklin Whitmore," he said, shaking it firmly. "But everyone calls me Frank. I'm a retired carpenter. Used to do custom furniture. Your grandmother and I were friends. She had me out to the carriage house a few times over the years to fix things. That's a good place you've got there. Solid." "I'm trying to get it up to code," Lily said. "There's a lot of work to do." Frank studied her for a moment. His eyes were shrewd but kind. "You doing it yourself?" "Most of it," Lily said. "I can't afford to hire people for everything." "You know anything about carpentry masonry?" "Not really," Lily admitted. "I'm learning as I go." Frank nodded slowly. Then he said something that changed everything. "I've got time on my hands, and I don't like seeing good work done poorly. If you want, I could come out and give you a hand. Show you how to do things right. I won't charge you. Consider it a favor to Clara's memory." Lily felt a lump form in her throat. "I couldn't ask you to do that." "You're not asking," Frank said. "I'm offering. Your grandmother had hands that knew how to work. I can see you've got them too. They just need some teaching." And so, the next day, Franklin Whitmore showed up at the carriage house with a truck bed full of tools. He taught her how to properly install insulation, how to cut and fit it so there were no gaps, how to staple it so it wouldn't sag. He showed her the difference between doing something fast and doing something right. "Speed is the enemy of quality," he said as they worked, "and quality is the only thing that lasts." He taught her how to patch plaster, how to mix it to the right consistency, how to feather the edges so the repair was invisible. He taught her how to replace the broken slate tiles on the roof, a terrifying job that had her clinging to a ladder 2 stories up, but which gave her a fierce sense of accomplishment when it was done. In the evenings after the work was done, they would sit by the wood stove, and Frank would tell stories. Stories about Clara, about the town, about craftsmanship. "Your grandmother was one of the strongest people I ever knew," he said one night. "Not strong like lifting things. Strong like a tree is strong. Rooted. Weathering storms. She never bent. She knew what mattered and she protected it." He looked at Lily. "She'd be proud of you. Not because you're fixing this place up, though. That's part of it. She'd be proud because you're doing it the right way. Not taking shortcuts, not selling out." Each night, Lily read another of Clara's letters. They were more than just instructions. They were lessons. Letter 2 was about the garden. Not just what to plant, but why. How vegetables from your own soil taste different because you know the work that went into them. How a garden teaches patience and humility. Letter 3 was about her mother as a child. A girl who climbed trees and caught frogs and asked impossible questions. Clara wrote about teaching her to read by lamplight, about braiding her hair every morning, about the sound of her laughter. Letter 4 was about Lily's father. Clara wrote about him honestly. He was a good man, hard-working, loyal, but he saw the world in simple terms. Success meant a bigger house, a newer car, a better job. He couldn't understand that some things had value beyond their price tag. Letter 5 was about the day Lily was born. Clara described holding her granddaughter by the arched window wrapped in a yellow blanket, promising her that this place would always be a safe harbor. Each letter was a gift, a connection to the past, a roadmap for the future. By the end of the 3rd week, Lily had spent over $28,000 on materials and necessary professional work. The money in the envelope was dwindling, but the house was transforming. The insulation was in, the roof was repaired, the plumbing worked, the wiring was safe, the wood stove blazed every night. She had even bought a simple new toilet and a small water heater, but she knew the real test was still coming. The notice from the county arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. It was delivered by a sheriff's deputy who looked apologetic as he handed it to her. It was a formal complaint filed by Riverside Development Corporation citing code violations and demanding an inspection. If the property didn't pass, they could get a court order to have Lily removed. The inspection was scheduled for 2 weeks from that day. Mr. Brennan called her that afternoon. "It started," he said. "They've scheduled an inspection. Deputy Harlan Boone will be conducting it. He's the county building inspector. If you don't pass, they can petition for condemnation." "Will I pass?" Lily asked, her heart sinking. "You've done a lot of work," Brennan said carefully. "You have new wiring and safe plumbing. You have a certified heat source. The foundation is solid. That's the big stuff. Harlan is a fair man. He knew your grandmother. Just be honest with him. Show him the work you've done. Show him what you're planning to do." The 2 weeks leading up to the inspection were the most intense of Lily's life. She worked from before sunrise until long after sunset. Frank was there almost every day, teaching her, helping her, pushing her to do better. They installed the last of the insulation. They patched every crack in the plaster. They sanded and sealed the floorboards. Lily used the last of Clara's money to finish the bathroom, making it fully functional and up to code. Every dollar was accounted for. Every ounce of her energy was poured into the house. The night before the inspection, Lily couldn't sleep. She lay in her sleeping bag on her cheap mattress, staring at the ceiling beams, and wondered if it would be enough. Frank had left her with a final piece of advice. "Don't try to hide anything," he'd said. "Don't make excuses. Just show him what you've built. Show him you respect this place. That's what matters." Deputy Harlan Boone arrived exactly on time. He was a big man, probably in his late 50s, with iron gray hair and a weathered face. He wore the county inspector's uniform and carried a clipboard. His expression was serious, professional. Lily met him at the door, her heart hammering. "Miss Hayes," he said, extending his hand. "Harlan Boone. I'm here to conduct the inspection." "Thank you for coming," Lily said, shaking his hand. Her palm was sweaty. "Let's take a look," Boone said. He didn't say much as she walked him through the property. He checked the wiring, opening junction boxes, testing outlets. He examined the plumbing, running water in the sink, flushing the toilet. He looked at the foundation, running his hands along the stone blocks. He checked the new roof tiles. He noted the insulation. He spent a long time looking at the wood stove, checking the installation, examining the stovepipe connection. Finally, he stood in the middle of the big room and looked around. He saw the plans for the next phase of renovations laid out neatly on the table. Lily's sketches for rebuilding the garden, her budget spreadsheets. "You've done a lot of work here," he said finally. His voice was a low rumble. Not unfriendly, but not warm either. "I have a lot more to do," Lily said quickly. "I'm saving up for new windows. I'm going to refinish the floors properly in the spring. I'm going to replant the entire garden." Boone nodded slowly. He looked at her for a long moment. "Riverside is putting a lot of pressure on my office," he said. "They want this place condemned. They've made that very clear." Lily's stomach clenched. She could feel her future balanced on the edge of his next words. "But it's not condemned," Boone continued, and something in his expression softened. "It's a work in progress. It's a home. Clara would be very proud of what you've done here." He took out his clipboard and made a few notes. "You'll get your certificate of occupancy next week," he said. "You passed." Lily couldn't speak. Relief washed over her like a wave. She just nodded, afraid if she opened her mouth she would cry. Boone turned to leave, then paused at the door. He looked back at her, and for the first time he smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. "Just so you know," he said, "I'm rejecting Riverside's application for an eminent domain seizure. They claim they needed this property for a public access road. But I happen to know there's another perfectly good access point a quarter-mile down the river. They were lying." He tipped his head slightly. "Keep up the good work, Miss Hayes." And then he was gone. Lily stood in the middle of her loft in the home she had fought for, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Victory. She had won. That night she celebrated alone. She made a big pot of soup on the hot plate and sat in front of the wood stove, feeling the warmth and the triumph. She had saved her home. She had proven herself. She took out the cedar box. There were only a few letters left. She had been saving them, not wanting the conversation with Clara to end. But now it felt right to continue. She opened letter number 9. It was about resilience, about how the hardest steel is forged in the hottest fire, about how strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build one decision at a time. Clara wrote about her own struggles, about losing her husband young, about raising a daughter alone, about the loneliness of being strong when everyone around you expects you to be weak. There will be times, Lily, the letter said, when you want to give up, when the weight of what you're trying to do feels too heavy, when the voices telling you to sell, to quit, to take the easy path get too loud. In those moments, remember this: every storm passes. Every winter ends, and the things worth protecting are always the things hardest to keep. You are stronger than you know. You come from a line of strong women. We didn't survive by being soft. We survived by being rooted, like oak trees. We bend in the wind, but we don't break. Lily folded the letter and held it against her chest. Outside, the wind was picking up, the first real cold snap of the season. But inside, the wood stove crackled and glowed. The house was warm, solid, protected. She had passed the inspection. She had won this round. But she knew the fight wasn't over. Riverside Development Corporation wouldn't give up. Men like that never did. They would look for another angle, another way in. But let them try. She was Clara's granddaughter. She had oak in her bones, and she was just getting started. The night of her victory, Lily allowed herself one moment of pure celebration. She sat by the wood stove with a bowl of soup, feeling the warmth seep into her bones, and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind her. But there were still letters left to read. She had been saving them, rationing them like precious resources. Each one was a conversation with Clara, and she wasn't ready for that conversation to end. But tonight, after proving herself, after winning her first real battle, it felt right to continue. She took out the cedar box and carefully removed letter number 12, the last one. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it. The paper was the same cream color, but Clara's handwriting here was different, more fragile. The letters were thinner, shakier. This had been written near the end. "My dearest Lily," it began. "If you are reading this, you have come to the end of my letters. But I hope it is the beginning of your story. There is one last secret this house has to tell. I couldn't write it down before. It was too dangerous. But Alistair knows. He will tell you when the time is right. When you have proven you are a Hayes. When you have shown you have the strength to protect this place. Your great-grandfather was a stonemason, a very good one. He was clever. When he built the fireplace in this room, he built it with a secret. Trust Alistair. Trust this house. It will protect you as it has always protected us. Live a good life, Lily. Be happy. Find love. Plant a garden. And never ever let them pave over our home. Forever yours, Clara. A secret in the fireplace. Lily walked over to it, running her hands over the cool, smooth stones. What had Clara hidden? What could be so important, so dangerous, that it couldn't even be written in a letter meant to be read only after her death? She didn't know, but she knew she had earned the right to find out. The next morning, she called Mr. Brennan from the payphone in town. "I passed the inspection," she told him, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "I heard," Brennan said, and she could hear genuine warmth in his tone. "Harlan Boone called my office yesterday. He was very impressed with what you've accomplished. He said you've done good work, real work." "Thank you for all your help," Lily said. "You did the work, not me," Brennan replied. "I just filed the paperwork." Lily took a breath. "There's something else. I read Clara's last letter. She said there's a secret. Something in the fireplace. She said you knew about it." The line was silent for a moment. Then Brennan sighed long and deep. "Ah," he said softly. "So you've reached that part of the journey. I wondered when you would." "What is it?" Lily asked. "It's not something I can explain over the phone," Brennan said. "Can you come to my office this afternoon? Say around 3 o'clock. "I'll be there," Lily said. The hours until 3 o'clock crawled by. Lily tried to work in the garden, pulling the last of the stubborn weeds before winter set in completely. But she couldn't focus. Her mind kept returning to the fireplace, to its solid, silent stones. What could be hidden inside? At 3 o'clock sharp, she was sitting in the same leather chair in Mr. Brennan's office, where her journey had begun just weeks ago. It felt like a lifetime. Brennan looked at her across his large oak desk. His expression was serious, but not unkind. "You look different, Lily," he said. "You've grown into yourself." "This place changes you," Lily admitted. Clara knew it would. He reached into a drawer in his desk and pulled out a long, thin envelope. It was old, the paper yellowed at the edges. Lily's name was written on the front in Clara's handwriting. "She left this with me 8 years ago. It's a letter of instruction from her and a legal affidavit signed by her father, your great-grandfather, James Edmund Hayes. Dated 1934. He slid it across the desk. Lily took it. The envelope felt impossibly important in her hands. "What does it say?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. Brennan leaned forward, his voice dropping low as if they might be overheard. "It says that the deed for your property is not what it appears to be. When the Millhouse estate was broken up during the Depression, your great-grandfather was given his parcel as payment for years of service. But the family he worked for, the Ashfords, were in terrible trouble. They were losing everything. But they were clever people. They wanted to protect the one piece of the estate that truly mattered to them, the river access. Lily said quietly. She remembered the brochure, the glass balconies overlooking water, riverside estates. Exactly, Brennan said. The river access and the water rights associated with it. The Ashfords couldn't keep the land in their own name. The banks would have seized it. So they made a secret deal with the one person they trusted completely, James Edmund Hayes. He paused, letting the weight of history settle between them. The official deed, the one on file with the county, shows your parcel ending 100 feet from the riverbank. That's what Riverside Development has seen. That's what they think they're working around. But there's another deed, Lily said. Her heart was starting to pound. There is, Brennan confirmed. A private deed, legal and notarized. It grants your parcel an additional 50-foot easement right to the riverbank itself. And more importantly, it grants the owner of the parcel primary water rights from that section of the river. He let that sink in. The original document is in that envelope. It supersedes the public record. Your great-grandfather witnessed it. He kept it hidden all these years to protect the Ashfords and to protect this legacy. Lily stared at him, her mind struggling to grasp the implications. Water rights, she said slowly. The most valuable commodity in development, Brennan said. Lily Riverside's entire plan for their luxury condominiums depends on having river access. They need it for a marina. They need river water for their landscaping and utilities. Their current architectural plans show their main water intake valve located directly in the center of your easement. He leaned back in his chair. Without your permission, which comes with those water rights, their entire $100 million project is dead in the water. They can't build. Lily couldn't speak. It was a masterstroke, a hidden checkmate planned almost a century ago. Your grandmother knew this, of course, Brennan continued. It was her trump card, but she knew how dangerous it was. If the wrong people had known about this document before you were ready, before you had proven yourself, they would have done anything to get it, bribed you, threatened you. Maybe worse. That's why she hid it, Lily whispered. That's why she built the story of the worthless carriage house. It was all a magnificent deception, a fortress of stories, Brennan agreed, to protect a single piece of paper. And the fireplace, Lily asked. Brennan smiled for the first time. According to the affidavit from your great-grandfather, he sank one of the original granite estate boundary markers into the foundation of the fireplace itself. A permanent, immovable record of the true property line. The fireplace isn't just in your house, Lily. It is the corner of your property. It is the proof. Lily walked home in a daze. The world felt unreal, shimmering. She had gone from being a homeless girl with nothing to the owner of a liability to the custodian of a home, and now to the sole person holding the key to a massive corporate development. Back at the carriage house, she went straight to the fireplace. She ran her hands over the stones, seeing it with completely new eyes. It wasn't just a hearth. It was a monument, a declaration, a boundary marker disguised as a home's heart. She didn't need to break it open. The document in her hands was the weapon. The fireplace was the proof. The next morning, Lily sat at the wooden table and wrote a letter. She kept it short, direct. She addressed it to the CEO of Riverside Development Corporation and sent a copy to Mr. Brennan. To whom it may concern, please be advised that my property at 112 River Road includes a 50-foot riverfront easement and primary water rights, as detailed in the attached legal affidavit. Any attempt to build on or draw water from this section of the river will be met with immediate legal action. My home is not for sale. It never will be. Sincerely, Lily Wren Hayes, owner. She sent it by registered mail. The response was seismic. The day after the letter was delivered, all construction activity on the adjacent parcels stopped. Completely. Bulldozers sat silent. Workers stood around looking confused. The constant noise that had become background music to Lily's work simply ceased. A week later, Mr. Brennan called. "They want to meet," he said. There was undisguised triumph in his voice. "They're not threatening anymore. They're begging." "I'm not interested," Lily said. "I think you should hear them out." Brennan advised, "You hold all the cards now, Lily. You don't have to sell, but you can dictate terms. You can ensure this place is protected forever." She thought about it, thought about what Clara would do. "All right," she said finally. "I'll meet with them, but on my terms, in your office, with you present." "Absolutely," Brennan said. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Lily dressed carefully that morning. She wore the only nice clothes she owned, bought second-hand from a thrift store in town. A simple dark skirt and a white blouse. She pulled her hair back. She wanted to look professional, adult, like someone who couldn't be pushed around. Frank Whitmore drove her to the meeting. He waited in the truck outside reading a newspaper, ready to be there if she needed him. Mr. Brennan's conference room was on the second floor of his building. It had a long oak table and tall windows that looked out over Main Street. When Lily walked in, 3 people were already seated on one side of the table. 2 were men in expensive suits. One was older, probably in his 50s, with steel gray hair and the hard eyes of someone used to getting what he wanted. The other was younger, maybe 30, with a leather portfolio in front of him. He had to be a lawyer, but it was the third person who caught Lily's attention. A woman, late 40s, blonde hair pulled back in an elegant twist. Designer blazer, pearl earrings. She had the kind of polished professional appearance that came from money and power. Her eyes were a striking blue-green. When she saw Lily, something flickered in those eyes, recognition or surprise, maybe both. Maybe, "Miss Hayes," Mr. Brennan said, gesturing to the chair beside him. "Please sit down. Allow me to introduce Ms. Victoria Ashford, CEO of Riverside Development Corporation. Mr. David Cross, Senior Legal Counsel, and Mr. Thomas Park, Project Manager." Victoria Ashford. The name registered in Lily's mind. Ashford. The older man cleared his throat. Miss Hayes, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I think we can resolve this situation to everyone's satisfaction. I'm listening, Lily said, keeping her voice neutral. We've reviewed the documents your attorney provided, Cross continued. The water rights issue is unexpected. However, Riverside is prepared to make a very generous offer to resolve it. We're willing to offer $1 million for an easement that would allow us access to the water intake point we need. You would retain ownership of your property. We would simply be purchasing the rights to draw water. $1 million. Lily let the number sit in the air. She didn't react. We believe this is more than fair compensation, Cross said when she didn't respond. No, Lily said simply. Cross blinked. I'm sorry. No, Lily repeated. I'm not selling. Miss Hayes, perhaps you don't understand the $2 million, the younger lawyer interrupted. We're authorized to go as high as $2 million for the water rights alone. Lily looked at him, then at Cross, then at Victoria Ashford, who had been silent this entire time, watching Lily with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. No, Lily said again. Cross's professional veneer cracked slightly. Miss Hayes, what exactly do you want? Lily took a breath. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. It's not for sale, she said clearly. Not for any amount. Then what? Cross started, but Victoria held up her hand. Wait, she said softly. It was the first time she'd spoken. Her voice was cultured, measured. But there was something underneath it, an emotion Lily couldn't quite identify. Victoria was staring at Lily, really looking at her. You look like her, Victoria said. You look like Margaret. The room went silent. Clara, Lily corrected quietly. Her name was Clara. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. Clara. Of course. I knew her as Margaret Clara. She went by Clara later. You knew my grandmother? Lily asked. Victoria's composure, that perfect corporate polish, cracked. Her eyes filled with tears. I did, she said. A long time ago. She took a breath, gathering herself. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. 35 years ago, I was Victoria Ashford, daughter of Richard and Eleanor Ashford. We lived in the mill house, the estate. It was our family home for 3 generations. Lily's breath caught. I was 13 when we lost everything, Victoria continued. The Depression had destroyed my grandfather's investments. The banks were foreclosing. We had to leave. We lost our home, our land, everything. She paused, looking down at her hands. We had nowhere to go, no family to take us in. My father was broken. My mother was terrified. And in the middle of that nightmare, your grandmother appeared. Clara Hayes, the groundskeeper's wife. The woman who lived in the carriage house. Victoria's voice cracked. She brought us food, bread she'd baked, vegetables from her garden. She didn't have much, but she shared what she had. She helped my mother pack. She held my hand when I cried about leaving my room, my toys, my life. She told me that home wasn't a building. It was the people who loved you. A tear rolled down Victoria's cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but more followed. Before we left, my father made a deal with her husband, with James Hayes. The water rights, the easement. My father said it was insurance, that someday when things were better, the Ashfords might be able to reclaim something. Your great-grandfather agreed to hold it in trust, to keep the secret, to protect it. She looked at Lily directly now. I took my mother's maiden name, Blackwood. I built a career I climbed. I fought my way to where I am now. CEO of a development corporation. Successful. Powerful. Her laugh was bitter. And the first major project I greenlit was building luxury condominiums on the ruins of my family's estate. The irony isn't lost on me. David Cross shifted uncomfortably. Miss Ashford, I'm not sure this is relevant to the... It's relevant, Victoria said sharply. She looked back at Lily. I didn't know it was Clara's granddaughter. The reports just said the property was owned by a trust. An obstacle. A problem to be solved with money and lawyers. She stood up slowly and walked to the window looking out at the town. Your grandmother saved my family, she said quietly. In our darkest moment when we had nothing, she gave us kindness. She gave us dignity. And now I'm trying to destroy the place she loved, the place she sacrificed everything to protect. She turned back to Lily. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so deeply sorry. The room was silent for a long moment. The two lawyers looked uncomfortable, uncertain how to proceed. Mr. Brennan watched carefully, his expression unreadable. Lily stood up. She walked around the table until she was standing directly in front of Victoria. You want to build your condominiums? Lily asked. Victoria looked surprised. Yes. It's $100 million project. Investors, contracts, jobs. But not at the expense of... Then here are my terms, Lily said. Her voice was steady, clear. She had thought about this all week. You can build, but you will redraft your entire site plan. You will move your development 200 feet back from my property line. You will create a permanent, undeveloped green space between your buildings and my land. Cross started to object, but Lily kept talking. You will fund a conservation trust to maintain that green space and the riverbank in perpetuity. You will make a donation of $150,000 to the Coldwater Historical Society in Clara Hayes's name. And you will pay for the complete museum-quality restoration of the carriage house, overseen by a certified architectural preservationist of my choosing. That's, Cross sputtered, that's insane. The cost changes alone would be millions. The timeline, or, Lily said calmly, you can walk away from your $100 million investment right now. Those are the only two options. She looked at Victoria. My grandmother saved your family. These terms honor that. They protect what she loved while allowing you to build something new. It's fair. Victoria stared at Lily for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine. Clara would have been proud of you, she said. She turned to her lawyers. Accept the terms, all of them. I'll handle the board. Ms. Ashford, Cross protested. The financial impact. I said accept them, Victoria said firmly. This is the right thing to do. And sometimes that's more important than the profitable thing. It took a week for the contracts to be drawn up. Mr. Brennan reviewed every word, every clause, making sure they were ironclad, unbreakable. When Lily finally signed them, she felt the weight of generations lifting from her shoulders. She had done it. She had protected Clara's legacy. She had won not through force, but through integrity. Winter came to Millbrook. The first snow fell on a quiet Tuesday morning, dusting the carriage house in white. Lily stood at the arched window watching it accumulate on the bare branches of the oak trees and felt at peace. The restoration team arrived in early spring. They were artisans, craftspeople who specialized in historical preservation. They treated the carriage house with reverence, understanding that they weren't just repairing a building. They were honoring a legacy. They restored the slate roof, replacing each damaged tile with period-accurate materials. They repointed the stonework carefully, matching the original mortar. They installed new windows custom-made to match the original specifications but with modern insulation. They sanded the floors until they glowed like honey. Lily worked alongside them every day, learning, absorbing. Frank Whitmore was there too, consulting, teaching, making sure the work met his exacting standards. Quality, he would say whenever someone suggested a shortcut. Quality is the only thing that lasts. In the afternoons, Lily worked on the garden. She replanted Clara's beds according to the detailed instructions in the letters. Tomatoes, beans, herbs. She found the well behind the garden wall exactly where Clara's map had indicated. Frank helped her service the old mechanical pump. When they finally got it working and clear cold water gushed out, Lily cupped her hands and drank. It tasted like home. The old Ford truck got a complete restoration too. A local mechanic, a friend of Frank's, took it to his shop and worked on it with the care of someone restoring a piece of art. When he brought it back, the seafoam green paint shone like new. The chrome gleamed. It looked like it had just rolled off the factory floor in 1953. Lily drove it through town on a sunny April morning and people waved. She was no longer the outsider. She was Lily Hayes, Clara's granddaughter, the girl who had saved the carriage house. 6 months after the contracts were signed, the restoration was complete. The carriage house was magnificent. The stone walls had been cleaned and preserved. The timber beams glowed with fresh oil. The floors were smooth and beautiful. Light poured through the new windows. The fireplace, that secret monument, stood proud and clean. But Lily had been planning something more. She had been reading about Clara, researching. She learned that her grandmother had spent years helping people in Millbrook, teaching gardening, showing neighbors how to preserve food, helping young mothers learn to sew. Clara had been a pillar of the community, quiet and strong. Lily wanted to honor that. She used part of the ground floor to create what she called Clara's Workshop. It was a community space, free to anyone who wanted to learn. Frank taught woodworking classes on Saturday mornings, basic carpentry, how to fix things instead of throwing them away, how to build furniture that would last generations. Lily taught gardening, how to grow your own food, how to preserve the harvest, how to work with the seasons instead of against them. She organized elder storytelling nights. The older residents of Millbrook would come and share their memories, their wisdom, their stories of the town as it used to be. She recorded them all, preserving history that would otherwise be lost. Local craft circles met there, quilting, knitting, weaving, skills that were fading being kept alive by those who remembered. The grand opening was on a perfect June day. It seemed like the entire town showed up. Mr. Brennan was there looking proud. Frank Whitmore stood beside him grinning. Deputy Boone came bringing his wife, and Victoria Ashford came too. She arrived quietly without fanfare. She walked through the workshop, running her hands along the restored stone walls, her eyes full of tears. She would have loved this, Victoria said to Lily. Clara. She would have been so proud. She handed Lily an envelope. What's this? Lily asked. The final bill for the restoration was $285,000, Victoria said. I'm including an additional payment of $250,000. I want you to create an endowment, the Clara Hayes Legacy Fund. Use it to keep this place running, to help people the way she helped my family. Lily couldn't speak. She just hugged Victoria, this woman who had been an enemy and had become something like family. That night, after everyone had gone home, Lily sat at the wooden desk by the arched window. The same desk where she had read Clara's first letter, where her journey had truly begun. She took out the cedar box. It was empty now. All 12 letters had been read, studied, absorbed, but their words lived in her heart. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. She uncapped a pen, and she began to write. My dearest child, she wrote, though she had no child yet, no family of her own. If you are reading this, it means I have left you something. Not just a building, but a story, a legacy, a home. She would write 12 letters of her own, lessons she had learned, wisdom Clara had passed down, stories that needed to be preserved, because that's what legacy was. Not money, not property, but wisdom passed from one generation to the next, hands teaching hands, hearts remembering hearts. She looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The garden was lush and green. The river glinted in the distance. Across the green space, she could see the first buildings of Riverside Estates going up. They were beautiful in their way, modern, clean, but they stayed back, respecting the boundary, honoring the agreement. Frank's truck pulled up. He got out carrying a bag of groceries. He'd started doing that, bringing her food, checking on her, being the family she didn't have. Thought you might be hungry. He called up to the window. Lily smiled. "Come on up. I'll make dinner." She stood and walked to the fireplace. She placed her hand on the stone, the cornerstone of her property, the proof of her legacy, the secret her great-grandfather had built with skill and care almost a century ago. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, "for everything, for the sacrifice, for the strength, for showing me what home really means." She turned and went downstairs to let Frank in. Later, they sat at the table eating a simple meal, talking about the day, about the workshop, about the people who had come. Frank told her about a young man who had shown up wanting to learn furniture making. His grandfather had been a carpenter, but the skill had been lost when he died. Now it would be learned again, passed on. "That's what this place is about," Frank said, gesturing around the loft. "Passing things on, not letting them die." After he left, Lily went back to the window. She thought about her journey, from the girl who had been thrown out with a box and $43 to the woman she was now. Strong, rooted, home. She thought about Clara's words. Some legacies can't be measured in dollars. They're measured in strength, in love, in sacrifices that echo through generations. She understood now. This wasn't just a carriage house. It was a fortress, a sanctuary, a testament to what one woman's love and sacrifice could create. Clara had given up everything to protect Lily, to give her this chance, this place, this future. And Lily had honored that sacrifice, not by selling, not by taking the easy path, but by fighting, by building, by creating something that would outlast her. The wood stove crackled softly. The floorboards creaked as the house settled for the night. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Lily Wren Hayes sat at her desk and continued writing her letter to the future, to the next generation, to whoever would come after her and need to know this story. "This place is not a liability," she wrote. "It is a sanctuary. It is proof that home isn't something you inherit. It's something you protect, something you build, something you pass on. Stand firm. Stand strong. Know that you come from a line of women who bent in the wind but never broke, who knew the difference between price and value, who understood that some things are worth more than money can measure. This is your home, not because of the walls or the roof or the land, but because someone fought for it. Someone sacrificed for it. Someone loved you enough to make sure you would always have a place to come back to, a safe harbor." She signed it simply, "With all my love, Lily." She folded it carefully and placed it in the cedar box, the first of 12 letters she would write, her own legacy, her own gift to the future. Outside, the wind picked up. The oak trees whispered their ancient songs. The river flowed constant and cold. And the carriage house stood solid and strong, a fortress of stone and timber and love, sheltering the generations that came before and all the ones yet to come. Lily turned off the lights and climbed into her bed. The real bed Frank had helped her build, proper and sturdy, made from oak, harvested on the property. She pulled the quilt up to her chin, handmade by women in the quilting circle, each square stitched with care. She was home, not the home she had been born into, but the home she had chosen, the home she had fought for, the home she had earned. And as she drifted off to sleep, she could almost hear Clara's voice on the wind, warm and proud, whispering the words that mattered most. "Well done, my girl. Well done."